Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Really glad to have this man on. He's a U.S. Representative, District 6, out of the great state of Florida. He's a great Republican. It's Mike Waltz. Mike, how are you? Good to meet you.
Hey, doing great. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
So, did you think about changing the pronunciation of your name once Kamala Harris announced her running mate?
Oh, my God. Look, I should have clarified. It's Waltz with a T. That's T for Trump. That's easy way to remember it. And by the way, I actually carried a weapon of war in an actual war.
Okay, all right.
And I can load a shotgun. And what else? Oh, I retired as a rank of colonel, not general. I'm proud to be a colonel. I don't need to lie about it. So,
well, Mike, I've got to ask you this.
That clears things up.
Well, were you in Hong Kong when Tiananmen Square was happening or not?
No. And you know what? After they massacred thousands of students,
right.
I wouldn't have gone after that either and let them pay my way.
You know, I was in China adopting my daughter Jia, and I purposely Googled Tiananmen Square in Beijing from that event. And you know what the story is there? They claim one person died because a bullet ricocheted off of the ground. Now, you and I know that it was thousands, as you said. It was a bloodbath. They killed anybody who wanted freedom and liberty. If you're Tim Walz, why would you ever brag about going there so often? I'm confused about how he thinks that helps his chances.
Well, and not only does he brag about going, as a teacher taking students when it was literally students that were fighting for their basic freedoms, the right to assemble, the right to free speech.
Yes.
Right. And the essential freedoms that we should all hold dear, that I would hope he was teaching his students. And instead, he takes these propaganda junkets from an oppressive dictatorial regime that now is committing a modern day genocide by putting literally millions of people in concentration camps with the Muslim Uyghurs.
And by the way, Mike, if you go there 34 times, the government knows you. They're welcoming you. The government is probably guiding you, no?
Well, that's right. And this is what the Chinese communists, and it's part of Marxist theory to kind of invest in influence operations through what they call their United Front operations, and what they see as could be future leaders. Just ask Eric Swalwell and Fang Fang, who he was introduced to as a young up and coming city councilman, or Barbara Boxer with her driver, or Governor Hochul with her deputy chief of staff, or Trudeau, whose father toured during the Cultural Revolution, 60 million dead, and yet he writes a book, How Great Mao Is. So yes, this is par for the course, and he will be a heartbeat away from the presidency, having been influenced in such a dangerous way.
The congressman has a brand new book out. It's called Hard Truths, Think and Lead Like a Green Beret. It's actually out in just a few days, about 4 days from now. You can go pre-order it right now on Amazon. You see the book. When I take him full, if you're watching, you see the book on the screen as well. I've got to ask you one more thing about Walz. You mentioned his rank. The stolen valor is real. I had the guy, Tom Behrens, who actually was the CSM that took that unit to Afghanistan. He was never a CSM, but I'm a layman. I don't know E8 from E9. Doesn't matter to me. A sergeant master is really good. A command sergeant major is even better, but I wouldn't have known that. Mike, why do you think he had to lie about that? What does that get him by claiming he was something he wasn't when we can prove that he was never that thing?
Look, I think it's clearly an insecurity because he never really went to combat. And here's a hard truth, just to channel the title from my book. When you are in a leadership position, even in the National Guard and Reserves, you're the commander or you're the command sergeant major, and your unit is called, you're charged with training, you're charged with preparing. And then here's a hard truth, you go. And you lead your men and women downrange and you bring them home. You don't just collect the paycheck and then collect the pension. Look, and there's plenty of National Guardsmen and women. Maybe they never went. I retired from the National Guard, but that's because they never got called, and that's okay. But you don't need to be so insecure that you've got to inflate your record. And we've seen this over and over again. People with stolen valor, they get away with it a little bit, then they get away with it a little bit more, and then they inflate, exaggerate. And they're clever, ones like him. They never quite say it themselves. They just they imply it, let everybody else say it, and they never correct them. And he clearly did it for political gain, which just makes it disgusting.
Well, it does. And for those who are confused that he somehow retired before they knew they were going to go, that's not true. The warning letter came in April. He retired in May. They got the actual orders in July. So the lie continues. You're right. He was told, you're going to go. And that's when he said, well, I'm going to leave. And he got up and he left. And again, it is not a knock in my mind because I'm not a military guy. My dad was, but I'm not. An E8's pretty good. I don't know why you had to be an E9, but he has said it himself, Mike. He actually said, I was the top ranked ever to be in the United States House of Representatives. That's not true. Tony Gonzalez, who's there now, is an E9 out of the Navy. So he lied about that as well. And I don't get that. I don't get it.
Joe, here's what's kind of so clever. So he actually was promoted to Sergeant Major, the top enlisted rank.
Right.
But you all know, and you have to actually sign documents to say, unless you complete the Sergeant Major's Academy and serve for so long, you will be reduced back down to Master Sergeant.
Right.
He knew that. So now they changed his bio and his campaign, Harris Walz campaign website to say served as E9 rather than retired at, even though he lied about it for many years. So like if you go to Yale or Harvard Law and you take a class or two, you don't get to say you graduated from there.
Exactly right.
But that's essentially what he did.
He was an E9 in training. He never finished the training. That's actually very simply put. It is U.S. Representative District 6 Republican, great state of Florida, Mike Waltz. Go and get his, and again, there's a T in there, WALTZ. Go and get his book called Hard Truths, Think and Lead Like a Green Beret. And all the proceeds are going to go to veterans charities. You can pre-order it now on Amazon. I haven't been a Green Beret. How do I think like one? Fill me in.
Well, look, I get asked all the time, what's the difference in Green Berets, U.S. Army Rangers, Navy SEALs? And the easiest way to describe it, you never want to get in a gunfight with a Ranger or a SEAL. They're the best in the world at doing what we did to Osama bin Laden. Other side of the world, 2 bullets in the forehead, in and out, middle of the night, and took him down. Right. Green Berets are different in that we embed with local tribes, with militias. We specialize in guerrilla warfare. We have to learn multiple languages and blend in. And we often go in very small groups, 3 or 4. In one of my tours that I talk about in the book, there were 3 of us embedded with 90 Arabs in a task force from Jordan and the UAE, partnered with 180 Afghans out in the mountains, as closest I've ever gotten to Lawrence of Arabia.
Wow.
And if I never eat goat again, I'll be just fine, right? But it takes a special mindset to be that autonomous, to be kind of out there as a warrior diplomat completely on your own. And you don't have any authority over these warlords or partnered military. So you've got to use your influence operations, messaging, even some would call it psyops and others to get them to do and build those coalitions what America needs them to do. And so, I say all the time, if I can get the tribes of Afghanistan to move in the right direction or the tribes in Africa, then I can deal with the tribes in the swamp. Although some days I think the tribes in Afghanistan were easier than the tribes in Washington, in Washington, D.C. And so if through each chapter I talk about the lesson learned in these various combat experiences, again, in Africa, in South America, in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, and then apply them now to this national conversation and what's going on in our politics.
Colonel retired from the U.S. Army Green Berets. It is Mike Waltz. He is a U.S. Representative, District 6, out of the great state of Florida. So when you got to the swamp, did they try to co-opt you? How does it work? Does somebody greet you and say, okay, great, you're here. You'll be a vote for us. This is how you vote. And then you had to show them right away, listen, I'm a Green Beret. I'm going to do my own thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's all these kind of groups and caucuses. Join this group, the moderate group, or the super conservative group. You can run for leadership, which means you spend 90% of your time raising money for other members because they're the ones that want to vote for you. I really am focused because I think the number one job of the federal government, protect our borders and keep us safe from abroad. Almost everything else, housing, education policy, whatever, I want Washington out of it. Push it down to the state and locals where they're closest,
of course,
to the voter. So I'm on the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee, oversight, and now on the Trump assassination committee, where I can use my experiences to hold the Pentagon accountable.
Right.
People should be fired there, and they never are, and get our men and women overseas, keeping us safe and free, the equipment, the training, the resources that they deserve.
It is Mike Waltz, U.S. Representative, District 6 Republican, great state of Florida. I've got to ask you about the Armed Services Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and the Committee on Intelligence, because listen, that's all right in your wheelhouse. But we're watching on one side of the world, in the Middle East, you've got Kamala Harris saying, we, of course, support Israel's right to defend itself, but the Palestinians should have their own right to their own destiny, which is something really stupid. That's not Israel should win. That's just dumb. Oh, and they want a ceasefire. At the same time, Mike, we sent over $200 billion to Ukraine, where you and I both know militarily Ukraine can't win. So how are those both policies of this government?
Yeah, look, if Bibi Netanyahu had listened to Biden and Harris, Sinwar would still be alive, plotting more October 7th. Hania, who they took out in downtown Tehran, would still be alive, plotting more kidnappings and torture and attacks. And so would Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, who, by the way, had the blood of U.S. Marines on his hands. So if he had listened to them, if he had conceded and really entered that ceasefire too soon and didn't go into Rafah like they were demanding he not do,
right, all
of those terrorists would still be alive. And these are the Osama bin Ladens and the Baghdadis kind of their group. So good on Bibi Netanyahu. Semper Fi on the behalf of our 83 Beirut Marines.
Yes.
And damn it, let them finish the job. Let them win for a change. Then you're in a position of strength to negotiate and get your hostages out. But that's because Harris and Biden and the people around them, they take an appeasement approach. They wake up in the morning thinking, how can I make more concessions and the other side will be nice? Well, you know what? Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, they don't want a two-state solution.
Right.
They don't want peace, right? And they don't want to enter
Mike, we could have had one by now.
Agreement.
We could have had one by now. Israel said yes to it probably in the 70s, certainly said yes to it in 1997, but the other side will not have it. You're right. They want river to the sea. They want the blood of Jews to be rolling in the streets. So saying that, why ceasefire in the Middle East, but nobody saying you could have had a ceasefire before Russia ever invaded Ukraine. You could have had Minsk. You could have had Istanbul. You could have had these agreements, but they've turned those down. So how do you act like, you're a sensible, logical country, the leader of the world, when you've got two very different takes on two conflicts?
Part of the total disconnect is, one, the anti-Semitism that's now baked into the progressive left, and two, coming from Biden and Harris. And I called this on October 8th. I said, listen, as soon as the progressive left starts demanding a change in policy, and when you had over 100,000 Michigan Democrats vote non-committed in the dead of winter after work, that's when you saw the big shift happening. This is pandering to the anti-Semitic progressive left. This is pandering to those protest groups that you see in Columbia and on college campuses, and their left-wing Marxist professors, and they're petrified of losing Michigan. So they're willing to sell out our ally. And for that matter, when's the last time you heard either one of them say the names of our hostages that have been there for over a year?
Yeah, never.
And for that matter, how about you shift policy on Iran until you cut off the cash? There will never be peace because they're just going to help these groups rebuild.
Well, she said the other night that it was Trump's fault that Iran did that. But and again, it's just that stupid. So they want the votes of those who say death to America in Hamtramck, Michigan, and Dearborn.
Yeah. The irony is they're abandoning them anyways, right? And so because they see that Harris has, no moral compass, she has no principles, is just saying whatever she has to say. And one of the things I talk about over and over again in Hard Truths, and when you find yourself out there alone, and one of the chapters, we were getting mortar fire, and one of my snipers saw that it was a 10-year-old little boy that was calling it in. Rather than split this kid in half with a 50 cal Barrett, which it would have, I had him fire a warning shot, followed him into his village. It turned out the Taliban had lined up all the families and forced them to give their oldest son. Those are the kinds of hard decisions you got to face in and every day in combat. And that's why I think we need more veterans. The more veterans, the merrier when it comes to making the hard decisions in Washington, D.C.
It's Representative Mike Waltz. Get this book called Hard Truths, Think and Lead Like a Green Beret. It's released on the 22nd. You can pre-order it right now on Amazon. I know you got to go. Can you give me 30 seconds on the investigation into the assassination attempts or no?
Well, let's just stay on Iran. This isn't just your death to America kind of throwaway chants that they do all the time. There is active plotting to kill President Trump. They believe his return is an existential threat to his rule. Why? Because he choked off their cash, and they are determined to kill him. I am determined to give him every protective asset, including military assets, to keep him safe. But we have heard virtually nothing from Biden and Harris, and that is essentially green lighting these kinds of attacks, and it's shameful.
I appreciate you coming on. Great to meet you. You're doing great work in the House of Representatives, and I grew up in Florida, so we've got that as well. The book is called Hard Truths, Think and Lead Like a Green Beret. It is from U.S. Representative, former Green Beret. I guess you say retired U.S. Army Green Beret. It is Mike Waltz. Mike, thanks a million for coming on. Let's do it again soon.
Hey, thank you. Would love to.
All right, brother. Appreciate you. We're back after this. Stay right here.